I'm Dr. Alfred Davis Jr., your Master of Ceremony for this morning. We'd like to, before you begin eating, to bless the food. So we'd like to be able to have the invocation. But before we do that, I'd like just to welcome everybody out this morning. It's no snow. It is cold, but it's no snow. So we're glad that everybody's here to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. I'd like to, at this point, invite up to the podium Reverend Anita R. Wright. She is the pastor of Trinity Presbyterian Church. Reverend Wright.
Good morning. Let us pray, shall we? Almighty and gracious God, we do thank you very much for the blessings of this day. We thank you, O God, for allowing us to be here and to celebrate the legacy, the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. We pray, O God, that you would bless us, bless the food that has been graciously prepared for us, use it to nourish us. Help us and share our time of sharing together and fellowship, as well as scholarship. We thank you for this in all things. Amen.
We'd like to begin our program this morning with the song Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is going to be sung by Mr. Edward Nicholas.
And a hush came over the crowd. Good morning, everybody. What a blessing to be here this morning. I'm grateful. For those of you that know the song, by all means, please do join along in with me. How many verses are we going to do, Mr. White? All three? Two? All three? We're going to do all three. For those of you that don't know all three, the words are in the program.
Out from the blue from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that rendition, Mr. Nicholas. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Martin Luther King Jr. program this morning. And we'd like to ask the Honorable Robert D. Jackson, Mayor of the Township of Montclair, to provide greetings. Mayor Jackson. Hey, give him a round of applause. Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning. On behalf of my colleagues on the Township Council, I'd like to greet everyone and welcome you to this annual gathering of fellowship as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and also recognize our young people as well as the hard work of the committee who have put this together for so many years. And I'm reflecting now on my good friend and former colleague, James Ramsey, former Mayor James Ramsey, who was so instrumental in helping to pull this all together. And I'm sure Doc Davis and Stanley will remember him fondly as I do. I think Deputy Bob Russo is here, my colleague Bob Russo is here. I'm not sure if any of my other colleagues are here. I believe Dr. Baskerville's under the weather, and I know Councilman Herlock asked me to send his greetings. He's taking his daughter back to college today, so he wasn't able to be here. Just one short comment. I'm looking forward to Dr. Glover's comments this morning as well. It's always good to see her, and again, privileged and looking forward to what she's going to say. I do say that I'm here this morning with actually a great sense of optimism. Sometimes in today's world that may not seem perhaps rational, but I am quite optimistic, largely because I have a fundamental belief in our community, and I have a fundamental belief in our country, and I believe our country is about our people. It's not about the government. It's not about who's running the government. It's about the people of the United States of America, and I believe that we remain strong. We have a wonderful, resilient, intrepid character, and I believe that whatever situation we may find ourselves in, that eventually we're going to emerge stronger. And I remember at one of the events we had, Doc, at the Trinity Presbyterian Church, and I mentioned this, so I'm going to just take a second to mention again, that I often reflect on what people thought in April of 1865 when people found out that President Lincoln had been assassinated. And the person who was his vice president who was going to take over was Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson said very succinctly and straightforward before he took office that America was a country for white people, and as long as he was president, it was going to remain a government for white people. So I wonder at that point what people of black, white, whatever, people of good faith and good intentions and good character, I wonder what they thought at that time. They probably thought that was the end. Yet here we stand today with a crowd that's fully diverse, that's people who are progressive, good-natured, and willing to move our country forward. So I guess as my mother would say, this too shall pass. And I look forward to a wonderful speech by Dr. Glover, and again, good morning.
Thank you, Mayor Jackson. Next, we'd like to just acknowledge the folks who came here and provided us breakfast. Sandwich is unlimited. I trust that the breakfast is good. Yes? All right, excellent. Fantastic. We also would like to thank Samson's Printing for doing the printing of our program. Both of these vendors are in the catalog here. Next, we'd like to begin our presentations, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Perspectives on the World. And from the Renaissance Middle School at Rand, we have Samuel Welch. Samuel, come on up.
Now. Now? No. Now, there we go. Now, this speech will not just be about facts. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. got up in front of the crowd in Washington, D.C., he had an idea and an outline for what he was going to say. He stayed based in reality, but he spoke from his heart. And with passion leading him on that day, he made history. And the speech is a little bit like that. It's not improvised in any way, for I had a dream not very long ago in which I was asked to improvise a speech. It was absolutely terrifying, so we're not going to test that. But this speech comes from the heart. That doesn't mean that it's not true, because it's all based on fact. But in order, I feel, to truly understand how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would feel today, we have to break away from statistics and get real. Dr. King changed so many lives and brought people together. He preached nonviolence, and he refused to be silenced. And when the silence snuck up and stole him, everyone remembered his name, framed it in everlasting fame. And things have never been the same. Or have they? Because I see similar things happening today. It's been 50 years of violence and change. If Dr. King were to return today, what would he have to say? First, I think he'd be disappointed, because we have cops doing whatever they want, murdering, raping, pillaging, all protected by the law. Law, a matter of power, not justice. So even though just a year ago the second term of our first black president ended, the power scale has not shifted significantly. Because in this nation we are trained to look out for those who only looked and act like us. And when we refer to a majority, we are actually talking about a select group of straight white men holding down all of the rest. He would look in sadness at the prison system because the government has found a way to reintroduce slavery. With prison labor costing something like 50 cents, it makes economic sense for the police to go into a poor neighborhood, round up some people who normally never would end up in prison, not because of the color of their skin and their economic position. Nobody listens. Then they're put to work in prisons, making clothes and tending fields, forced to support a system that wants to hold them down, because we need some cheap labor to keep our country working. But that doesn't seem to be enough, because SWAT teams break into houses, drop flashbang grenades, blow off limbs and faces, and they say they're rooting out drugs and gangs. So the residents of the house are arrested or hospitalized, and the cops gut the house for anything valuable, in front of everyone's eyes, and no one's even that surprised. We have so many cases of police murder and rape of black men and women, and people pay attention for a while, then drift away, and the police and the government get away again. Dr. King wanted to hold those in power accountable, and since he has left, we have had a lot of trouble doing that. He would just look at the news, all the things the government is doing, without the people being able to do anything but resist. And even though they persist, the government insists that it is on the right side. The March on Washington for jobs and freedom. The benefits aren't as widespread as the government would like us to see them, because the truth is that the men in government have the power over the systems to determine the reality of those they wish to keep under them. And it's not just people of color. It's women in the LGBT community as well. It's immigrants and poor whites as well. And their lives are controlled by biases implemented against them in the economic, housing, government, job, and education systems. But Dr. King would also be proud and happy, because although things look pretty bad, we have made a lot of progress. I can come in, ethnically Jewish, quarter Jamaican, with white skin, and hair that's not totally Caucasian, and I don't face discrimination. I have a chance to be judged by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. I can play basketball with my black friends, not because I'm part black, but because I'm a good player. I can help white friends with geometry, not because they look similar to me, but because I can help them to understand his work. So finally, I understand that my situation is far from standard. So I think Dr. King would finally understand that he would have to continue his work, because we need to keep on marching. Because although we might think that little black boys and little black girls can join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers, the situation is truly anything but. Because anyone who looks or thinks or acts or believes differently, we mark as other. And even if we let them in, we still try to keep them out. Segregation without publication. A covert system of ideas and predispositions that put people into predetermined positions before they can even voice their opinions. So although we might look at a few strong points of diversity and equity and say we have reached the mountaintop, we are a long way from ever being able to stop. We have ignited the light, but we have not driven out darkness. We have asked ourselves what we can do to help others, and many of us have wrongly convinced ourselves that the answer is nothing. Yet we say we hear freedom ring. But when we put it all in perspective, we're still chasing the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I should let you all know how all of this comes about. On this past Saturday, January 13th, 2018, the Alpha Alpha Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity had its 19th annual oratorical competition at Metropolitan Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. Two of the finalists were from the Montclair Public Schools. Today we're fortunate to have the gentleman you just listened to, and also we have another one that's coming up. They're presenting their speeches on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s perspective on the world today. I'd like to have this opportunity to be able to invite up from Glenfield Middle School, Khalib Levine. Khalib, come on up.
I don't have the same problem. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerges from his magical time machine and looks around. Confused and disoriented, he surveys his surroundings, noticing a newspaper on the sidewalk. Bending down, he spots the dateline. November 1st, 2016, Memphis. He can't believe his eyes. I'm still in Memphis, he wonders. The last thing he remembers is standing on his hotel balcony. Now it's 2016? Looking for a place to sit down and clear his head, he spots a deli across the street. He crosses and enters. He takes a seat at a table, chin glued to his chest, trying not to be noticed. He slowly raises his head at the sound of a television in the corner broadcasting the news. Squinting, he makes out a black anchorwoman relating the news of the day. He's taken aback. Not once had he seen a black woman hosting a news program. He exits the deli and stands on the sidewalk. A couple walks across the street holding hands, a black man and a white woman. He stares after them, shocked by their open affection. His mind goes instantly to Richard and Mildred Loving, an interracial couple prohibited from marrying in 1960s Virginia. Richard was jailed for a year for marrying a woman of another race, before appealing his unjust jailing to the Supreme Court. Dr. King fears for the couple. He surveys the block for potential trouble, but no one even notices them. Now in awe of this seemingly utopian world, Dr. King picks up the newspaper he'd seen before, reading the front page headline, Barack Obama's presidency coming to a close. He gasps at the photograph of a black man waving to a crowd. The American president is black? In shock, he recalls conversations with his friends and fellow activists, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. They were always impatient in their fights for justice, and he'd frequently remind them that the good comes slowly, and it had. 50 years of waiting, and the good had arrived. He recalls his final speech to the sanitation workers in the Church of God here in Memphis. His final words were about his people getting to the promised land. And I've seen the promised land, he said. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. This must be it. This is the promised land. He had devoted his life to ending injustice, and now the job seems done. He hopes his friends are still alive to savor this moment. To have a black president surely means racial injustice no longer exists. Then, scanning down the front page, he notices some other headlines. Minority incarceration rates remain high. Voter disenfranchisement laws expand nationwide. He wonders what to make of American society when his thoughts are interrupted by the sound of a police cruiser roaring from behind him, siren blaring. The car screeches to a halt next to a black teenager strolling down the sidewalk with a backpack on. Two officers jump out and begin yelling in the boy's face. What are you doing? What's in your backpack? Where are you going? The questions come faster than the young boy can reply. He tries to squeeze in a response, attempting to explain that he's just walking home from a friend's house. Did you just interrupt me? One of the officers screams. The boy starts to cry. One of the officers pushes him against the wall behind them. I'm not going to see you around here again, am I? The boy picks up his backpack and runs away. King watches the officers share a smirk as they return to their car and drive off. The euphoric wave that had washed over him minutes before recedes into a sea of dread and fear. He feels naive to have thought that injustice could have been so quickly eradicated. 50 years is a long time, but maybe he needs to heed his own advice. Change is slow. He remembers a sermon he delivered a few years before his death. One of its lines was, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." If there are so many signs of improvement, why does it sometimes seem like nothing has changed? Perhaps a reason for this mixed perception of societal progress is that our standards for decency and compassion expand, even as our struggles for justice succeed. Perhaps this very reality has been the driving force for change since the dawn of time. Life today is better than it was 50 years ago, but the struggle is not over. Do we think that the fight for racial justice ended when slavery was abolished? Or the women's rights movement came to a close when women got the right to vote? Of course not. There has always been and will always be a fight to be fought, ground to be broken, and justice to be won. It was Dr. King that said that human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. If Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were here today, he would have the following message for the world. Good work. Now keep fighting. Thank you.
We want to thank both of our scholarship recipients for coming here today and providing that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s perspective on the world today. Once again, Samuel Welsh from Renaissance Middle School at Rand and Khalid Levine, Glenfield Middle School. Let's give them another round of applause, please. I'd like to bring everybody's attention to your table. There is a sheet that says, please provide your email address for next year's breakfast information. If you're not on our list, you should have the sheet on your table. Please fill it in, and we will pick them up at the end of the program. Thank you very much. All right. So we'd like to begin some of our acknowledgments. We'd like to start off by acknowledging two of our former scholarship recipients. We have Tom Reynolds, who was a scholarship recipient. Tom? And studying at William Patterson School, we have Moses Lewis. Moses? Excellent, all right. So we also would like to begin to acknowledge some of the dignitaries that are here with us. You already heard from our current mayor, Robert Jackson. Robert, just give us another stand here, please. Robert. We have our first ward councilor and former mayor, Robert Russo. We have Jerry Freed, former mayor. Jerry. We have Martin Schwartz, Town Planning Board. We have William Scott, the Montclair Housing Authority. We have Lincoln Turner, former freeholder. From our clergy, we have Reverend Campbell at the Rising Mount Zion Church. We have from the NAACP, James Harris, First Vice President and Education Committee Chair. All right, and we also would like to begin the process of acknowledging all of the members of the Montclair Board of Education. They always come out, they always support us, and so we'd like to be able to begin to acknowledge them. Our administrators first, we have Betty Strauss, Supervisor of Nursing. We have Mr. James Earl, Principal at Montclair High School. We have Mrs. Naomi Kirkman, Principal at Bradford School. We have Ms. Nami Kubarara, Principal of Charles H. Bullock School. We have Dr. Jill Sack, Principal at Buzz Aldrin School. We have Dr. Joseph Petrino, Principal at Glenfield School. We have Ms. Erica Pierce, Assistant Principal at Glenfield School. And we have Jill McLaughlin, Principal at Nishuane School. And our board members from the Montclair Board of Education, we have Mrs. Laura Herzog, who's the president. We have Reverend Javon Caldwell Gross. We have Mrs. Jessica DeConnick. Mrs. Ann Mernon. All right, thank you so much for indulging me in all of that. We wanted to acknowledge those members that have been here, and we probably missed somebody, but we'll get to you a little bit later on. If we have missed you, just let us know. Next, we'd like to move to our musical selection. From the Hillside Middle School, we have Layton Glover. Layton, come on up.
My name is Layton Glover. I am a fifth grader at Hillside Elementary School. I'll be playing 3 selections for you. 1, Johann Sebastian Bach's Minuet in G minor. Imagine Dragons, Believer, a song written by the band Imagine Dragons, and a little bit of Watermelon Man, a song by Herbie Hancock. So first I'll be playing Minuet in G minor by Johann Sebastian Bach, who lived from 1685 to 1750 and was one of the greatest classical composers of all time.
Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah.
Selection I'll be playing is called Believer, written by the band The Imagine Dragons. It's most popular in major sporting events such as the World Series and the Super Bowl, and also more popular for encouraging people to try their hardest. selection I'll be playing is part of Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man. Herbie Hancock was a black man who was part of the Miles Davis Quintet and was one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time.
Upcoming Herbie Hancock in our midst here. I think we have an upcoming Herbie Hancock in our midst here. Give her another round of applause. Fantastic. Right, to make a few more acknowledgments here, we'd like to acknowledge Stephanie Fitzgerald, Director of the Montclair Community Pre-K. Stephanie. We have Fire Chief Herman here. Our Police Chief Comforti. We have our former Fire Chief Kevin Allen is here. And we have our Assistant Superintendent Kendra Johnson. We also have my good friend Major Jennings, from Assistant Principal at Buzz Aldrin. He's here. Will Young, Montclair Police Department Chief. Lieutenant Tyrone Williams, Montclair Police Department. Kim Nelson, Montclair Police Department Juvenile Division. And let's see, Augawet Saunders, Montclair Police Department Community Policing. All right, we have Anthony Grasso, Principal at Watchung Elementary. Excellent. I think we'll probably have more, but I think that'll take care of it for right now. All right, so next what we'd like to do is we'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Reverend Dr. Bernadette Glover. Reverend Dr. Bernadette Glover is a native of Scotch Plains, New Jersey. She is a God-directed pastor as well as a discerning and articulate interpreter of church and social issues. A graduate of Eastern University, Palmer Theological Seminary, formerly Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary, she holds a Doctorate of Ministry degree from United Theological Seminary, where she studied as a Jeremiah Wright Molifi Asante Cornell West Fellow. A dynamic preacher of deep conviction, Dr. Glover's hallmark is her deep commitment to Christ, combined with her boldness in proclaiming God's word. She has recently been called to serve as the senior pastor of St. Paul Baptist Church in Montclair, New Jersey. Prior to assuming this leadership responsibility, Dr. Glover was associate professor of preaching and worship at the New Brunswick Theological Seminary, where she was recognized for her keen ability to guide her students into seeking for deeper understanding of spiritual truths and their call to ministry. In addition to preaching and teaching, Dr. Glover also enjoys writing both prose and music. Her book, Whispers Overheard, was published and has been adopted into the play of the same name. She credits divine inspiration for generating the lyrics and music for various songs. A selection of her music has been published under the title of Grateful Praise. Dr. Glover's work and work experiences have been multifaceted. Her story uniquely demonstrates God's plan of preparing and equipping those he calls to serve. She earned a certificate in spiritual formation from the Grace Institute in Dubuque, Iowa, and received an honorary degree of Doctor of Humane Letters from Eastern University. A special area that God has gifted Dr. Glover is in connecting with persons in sensitive and fragile periods of life. Dr. Glover also has served as executive pastor at the Cathedral International Church in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, where Bishop Donald Hilliard is the senior pastor. Dr. Glover loves ministry, convinced and committed to the gospel's transforming power. This third-generation minister's motto is, "I am in the business of putting myself out of business." Please welcome, everyone, Dr. Bernadette Glover.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? No? How about now? Much better. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to our mayor and to all of those who serve this community in such a fine manner. We're grateful for this opportunity to be together on such a cold and crisp day. Someone could be friendly and talk back to me. Sheesh. Tough crowd. I see. Tough crowd. I see. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you today and just have a couple of things to lift up before you, and then we'll be gone. I noticed on the program that this breakfast is supposed to go from 7:30 to 9:30, and so I will watch the clock and make sure that we are in that time frame, in that time frame, in that time frame. You know, growing up isn't easy. And when we grow up, one of the things that can give us much frustration is how our own face changes. Do you remember how you felt when you were a teenager and you had to look in the mirror at yourself every single day? Do you remember how all of a sudden it felt like your nose was in one place the night before, and the next morning your nose had adjusted and you didn't know how? You didn't know why. Do you remember how your skin changed? Do you remember how your feet were one size 1 week? Does anyone remember that? Yes. Your feet were one size, and then a couple of weeks later, you didn't know what happened to those feet. You looked down and you had canoes. You had canoes where once were feet. Yeah. Well, of course, you know, if we're having problems with our skin, we can see a dermatologist, and there are other things we can do. Plastic surgeons make nice money Praise the Lord. They make nice money, assisting us to be who we want to be. But you know, one of the things that I've noticed that many of our youth and adolescents are very comfortable with is a certain appendage that they didn't come into the world with. It's a certain appendage that they didn't have perhaps some years ago. You probably have noticed that appendage. It's attached to the hand. It's an extension of the hand. It's a kind of thing that you hold in your hand like this. You hold it in your hand like this. And in fact, I asked someone just yesterday, I said in reference to two adolescent girls, I said, when are they not on their device? And the response was, maybe when they're sleeping. You know, others just like that, right? Exactly like that. Let me suggest to you, in a very simple way, that the minds of our youth have been kidnapped. And I do mean kidnapped. Kidnapped. As I was thinking and praying about this morning, my mind went to a couple of lines from the Old Testament book of Daniel, and I'll summarize it for you. And this is in the opening chapter of Daniel, and basically it refers to young people being taken from one place to another place. And the young people who were to be taken were the young people who were promising, the young people who had appeal, the young people who had it going on mentally, physically, emotionally, the young people who knew how to carry themselves, the young people who would be an asset in another place. Not only were they to be taken, but they were to be taught the language of the new place. Oh my goodness. They were to be taught the language of the new place and the culture of the new place. In other words, they were to be completely indoctrinated. Their minds were to be reset. What about one of the new phones that we have? That new phone where your face opens it up. I want you to think about this. Just bear with me. Think about what it means that you can take your device, look at it, and the whole world opens at your gaze. Think about the implications of that message for any one of us, but particularly those of us who are younger, to believe we are taught, we catch the lesson every time we look at this extension of an appendage we have. Every time we look, the message we get is that the world is waiting for my gaze in its direction. The world is to open before me, and upon my desire, I will explore, I will do this, I will do that. I am in charge. Kidnapped. Kidnapped. I don't know if you read last week in the paper about how Apple, you perhaps read it and it was on the news, two of their major shareholders, they have billions of dollars of shares. Two of their shareholders, one of which is a teachers association in California, they appealed to Apple, demanding that they do something to, on the front end, combat the addictive nature of their own product. Because after studies had been done, it had been revealed, it had been made known that, of course, there are higher incidences. Hello, somebody. There are higher incidences of suicide. Not only suicide, but of course, anxiety. And of course, an increase in apathy and a decrease in empathy. And after studying the surveys, reading the information, reading the stats, I'm telling you, the Teachers Association, with millions of dollars invested in Apple, contacted them and said, do something on the front end, because we understand that this product has become addictive in nature and we won't stand for it. In other words, we want the minds of our youth back. We want their minds back. What is a mind worth? What is a mind worth? Well, this is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and this is always a solemn weekend. A solemn weekend. This is not just a weekend for us to sing and have quotes, but it is a weekend for us to remember that somebody's blood went into this. This is a weekend to remember that somebody else was willing to sacrifice, that many people were willing to sacrifice for a cause that wasn't their own door, and a cause that wasn't at their own door, but it became their own door because they understood that when we don't think of ourselves individualistically, we understand that we are part of the larger human family, and therefore, if something is pressing on my neighbor, it is my business. One of Dr. King's quotes is this: the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. To think intensively and to think critically. This is what we must do, not only as parents, not only as teachers, but as neighbors, as adults. All of us have to commit ourselves to pushing an agenda that says we as a people and our youth must learn to think critically and not simply repeat what we have heard. Not simply believe that we are informed because we have read a couple of lines. A couple of lines. A couple of lines. One of the things that has been pushed in our society is that success at any cost rules. Success means lights, fame, money, somebody quoting you. But let me suggest to you, that's not success. Success is when we serve humanity with a heart that says, I'm not just concerned about now, but I'm concerned about tomorrow. if we are going to release our youth from the captivity that is taking place as a result of what is before them through the world, the electronic world, that means that every one of us has a part to play. Let me do a reflection for a moment. One of the things that really changed my own thinking was some years ago when I was serving in Perth Amboy, and I was there 20 years as a staff pastor. But what would happen is that the mayor would do his annual address at our church. And I remember vividly one year when the mayor did his address. And when he did this address, he laid out the plan for the city for the next, 25 years. We saw the development here. We saw the development there. We saw this. We saw that. We saw everything that had been laid out, what development would look like. But you know what no one asked that day? No one asked the most important question. The most important question to ask was not what it will cost, but what will it produce? And when I say what will it produce, I'm not talking about in terms of economic benefit for the town, but we have to ask, what will it produce in terms of the character of the people? What will it produce in terms of our young people? How will all of us live together in light of this plan? What will happen to our health oh my God, what will happen to our health? What will happen to our environment if this is moved here, if that is moved there, if this is recaptured? This was years ago, and I did not understand at the moment the implications of that plan. I didn't understand. It took me a few years, but when I got it, oh, did I ever get it. The most important question for us to always ask is, what will something produce? It applies to our education. It applies to our schools, to every single school. It applies to the way we run government. It applies to the way the police do their job. It applies to the commission. What will it produce? Where are we now and where should we be? Has anything kidnapped us and we were unaware? All right, let me put it like this. Let me tell you a story. Just let me tell you a story. Just let me tell you a story. Last year, a father who's a member had a conversation with me. He wanted to come in and talk. And this father lives in Montclair. And he was telling me about his children. And I heard all about them, and children, what direction they were going in, schools they were interested in attending after high school and all that. That was all good. And he told me about his children's friends, and all that was good. But one thing was bothering that man. You know what was bothering that man? What was bothering that man, that father, was that his son had friends, and his friends were varied while they were in school. And he could go to his friend's house and study. And that was a good thing. But one day, while his son, who was African American, was at his friend's house, who happened to be white, it began to pour, and his son would always ride his bicycle. He rode his bicycle to the friend's house like he always did. But that day it started pouring rain. And the problem was that the son, the African-American son, rode his bicycle from the friend's house back to his home. He rode his bike in the pouring rain. Does anyone hear what I'm talking about? He rode his bike home in the pouring rain. And so he was welcomed by his family. And so the father asked his son this. He wanted to know if his friend's parents were home. And the son said, yes. And so the father had a conversation with the boy and wanted him to try to understand what was wrong with that picture. And so the father said to the son, I want you to think about it. If your friends were here and it started pouring rain, I would have driven your friends home. Your mother would have driven your friends home. Don't you understand? And the boy didn't understand a thing. You know why? Because even though his parents are African American, somewhere along the line, his mind was kidnapped. He couldn't understand that it's all right to be African American, it's all right to be white, it's all right to be who we are. But don't ever let anybody look at you as an honorary something else. We're all who we are by God's design. Thank God for it. And every one of us has a contribution to make to the world, to society. And we've got to do it not only as individuals, we have to do it as a town. We've got to do it as a school system. We can't teach to save our jobs. We can't, oh my God, no one likes that statement. We cannot exist as a school system with it in our minds that we have to preserve this, our funding, preserve that, because we're scared of losing it. And as a result, we compromise what we do. We can't just teach subjects. We've got to teach what it means to be a human being, a citizen. And when we don't, we have been kidnapped. We have been kidnapped. Well, she's telling me don't stop. The hour is almost upon me to stop. I'm going to tell you these last two bits and I'm done. I think. When we communicate the value of a life, then every life matters. When the value of a life matters more than how much money or how much real estate we have, then we will begin to appreciate one another. There are people who have made a lot of money as a result of their inventions, who are famous, God bless them, and have lived to regret what they invented. I will share this one with you that I was sharing with our church yesterday, and I'm done. Putting my little notes down, I'm done. My little handwritten notes, although I do have and use technology. Alfred Nobel There's a prize given in his name every year. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. received that prize. And it's not just the Nobel, known as the Nobel Prize, but it's the Nobel, what? Peace Prize. Alfred Nobel was a chemist, engineer, inventor. Spoke 5 languages by the time he was 17. 5 languages. He had a brother who died. And his brother died as a result of an explosion of nitroglycerin. And so Alfred Nobel wanted to come up with a safer alternative because he wanted to ensure that others would not be harmed. Does anyone hear this? He invented dynamite. He invented dynamite. I'm fast forwarding. I'm not telling the whole story. So let me fast forward to the end. Eventually, a French newspaper put out a misprint. And the misprint was that Alfred Nobel was dead. And people celebrated, they danced, they were happy, because in their words, the man who had made his money through death had died. And when Nobel became aware that they were dancing, they were celebrating his death, he was so devastated, he was upset, and as a result, oh my God, he made a decision. And the decision was that when he died, his money, oh my God, his money was to be set aside for the person who in the preceding year had made the greatest contribution, had the greatest benefit to humanity for peace. He regretted that he had ever invented dynamite. His intention was good, but he had no idea how it would be used in a harmful way. You know why? Because he never imagined that what he had produced for good could have been used other ways. So whether we are speaking, whether we are inventing, whether we are teaching, however we lead, the question before us always is, what will my leadership, my parenting, my teaching, what will it produce? Not only for good, but potentially for evil. It is time to be free. And we can do it. God knows we cannot look to Washington. We must do it as a people. Amen.
What a powerful message. Let's give Reverend Dr. Bernadette Glover another round of applause. The great pastor of St. Paul Baptist Church. Running a little bit behind. behind, but we just want to acknowledge Peter Coyle, Montclair Library Director. Peter, are you here? All right, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Trustees of the of the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Fund. We have representing the NAACP, Catherine Allen Curry. Catherine. Kevin Allen represents us at large. Kevin. Carol Brown is our treasurer. She's not here. Florence Deming, at large member. Florence. Catherine Nicholas, our library board member. Franklin Turner, who I don't think is here, is our Board of Ed, our Township Council representative. And we have Stanley E. White, our president. We'd like to bring Stanley White up. He is our fearless leader. Stanley, come on up.
Before I forget my name, I want to thank everyone that made today's event possible. With snowstorms, with flus, with miscommunication, this was one of the hardest breakfasts in all these many years to put together, but we have a full room. Rick Gerhardt from TV 34 is here videotaping. The young men that spoke about their experience from Friday with the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity did an excellent job. I couldn't get all 7 of the participants to be here, and some of you are glad I didn't, otherwise we'd be here a lot longer. And as the speaker, Reverend Dr. Glover and the pastor of Trinity Presbyterian Church are aware, at noon, the Montclair African American Clergy Association, NACP, and the Montclair Clergy Association will be having the noon Dr. King service. Reverend Glover's church is sponsoring it at St. Paul, and Reverend Wright is the speaker. So it's very important that I move along and keep the show going so we can leave. However, each year I do have to make an important public service announcement. This scholarship fund, as you have seen in your program, has supported students, graduates of Montclair High School since 1989, when Jim Ramsey and some other people formulated the scholarship fund. What most people don't understand is what happens behind the scenes. There's another excellent group in town called the Montclair Scholarship Fund. They do our pre-screening. So if you're listening on Channel 34 and one of your children is a graduating senior, all graduating seniors of Montclair High School should go on the Montclair High School website and complete the scholarship form that can be found there and submit it back to the guidance department. I said all graduating seniors. It's that process that allows the graduating seniors to be considered for any of the 100+ scholarships that are awarded at the high school at the Senior Awards Assembly either in late May or early June. I've been participating because that group, that auspicious group, recommends to our scholarship board 10 to 12 students, and we have a very tough decision to make. It's a decision of who do we not give a scholarship to? Because at this time, we're only able to give roughly 4 to 6 scholarships which are in the amount of $1,000 a year, renewable for the 4 years that the students are in college. We would like to do more. With support like I see this morning in this room, we could do more. But you've seen that we made a little progress. One of our recipients is now an architect, and you see him present, and you see his ad in the journal. As Moses Lewis comes forward, who's one of our current recipients, I'd just like to say thank you for the support and allowing the Dr. Martin Luther King Scholarship Board to do what they do. At this time, I would like Moses to tell you what he's about.
Hi, I'm Moses Lewis. I'm not much of a speaker, but I attend William Patterson University. I'm going into my second semester as a sophomore. My major is business management. I used to be a marketing major, but now I'm a business management major. And for the most part, I'm enjoying my time at William Patterson. It's definitely a blessing to be able to further my education at a university, and I'm having a great time. And I thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Moses. We try each year to have a scholarship recipient present, but as you may not be aware, most of the students are just going back to school from their Christmas break. So maybe we need to concentrate on getting students that are going locally to school. I don't know, we'll see what happens in June when we start awarding again. But thank you for your participation. As Dr. Davis, I think, mentioned, please give us your email address, and next year, this time, we'll improve our communication to you. Have a good day. Look forward to seeing you at noon at St. Paul's.
Everybody can stand. We're going to sing the song, We Shall Overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We'll walk hand in hand.
We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand today.
One more voice so we shall overcome. And sing it!
We shall overcome.
Raise your voices.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.
gonna do a little hum while we are released in praise.
Let us receive our benediction. As we have been taught, go now and overcome. Overcome racial hatred with love and understanding. Overcome sexism with mutual honor and respect. Overcome social inequities with fair and equal educational and employment opportunities. Overcome mean-heartedness with a kind word or good deed. Overcome war, poverty, hunger, and suffering throughout our urban streets and lands abroad by sharing love with your neighbor. Go now and overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Let's have a great day, and we'll see you everybody next year. Thank you so much, and get a lot